Hello Renaissance artists, this is the second lesson of our final 8th module of the Renaissance Academy first year. Today we are going to apply color to the painting that I had started last week. So the point about this lesson again is just simply to instruct you in what to do in your own painting in the next step. So once you get the whole thing laid out, your composition done and in place, and then you get the drawing of everything accurate, you're ready then for the next stage. So that's what I'm going to show you here today on this painting. So I'm going to demonstrate applying the color, and this is just the first layer. There's still a lot more to do on this painting, but we will get you this far. Okay, so let's jump in. Okay, so I'm going to start out with the background first. I'm going to be using my reference of my plein air study right here while painting this area up in here. So that is where I'm going to go with my plein air. I might leave a lot more of this ochre, this golden color shining through while I'm painting. All right, and then so for colors today, if I could stop that from splashing. I have all my standard colors. I have titanium white, cad yellow medium. I'm probably not going to be using the red, at least not at this point. That's cad red medium. Yellow ochre, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, a little bit of phthalo green, and a little bit of alizarin crimson. And here we go. So I'm just going to grab a large size 12 stiff brush. If you don't have this, your 10 will work just fine. I'm going to just get a little bit of a thinner mixture going of some ultramarine blue, a little bit of white. Looking at my picture here, I want to start with the sky. I'm going to make it a little bit, like I said, darker than I see it. What I want to do first is kind of just map out where the darker areas of the sky are going to go. And again, I'm thinking about my composition, and I want this to be a little bit more golden yellows and stuff right here behind him. So that'll fade over this way. So then up here, as you can see, according to my paint already on the canvas, it's going to be the darker area. I didn't mix up enough color impact, so I'm just mixing up a stronger pile here. I could use a little bit of linseed oil at this point. Try that. All right, we'll see what happens with that. It's kind of gray. Let's add a little more blue. Again, just mapping out where I see some of these clouds and as I saw them when I was plein air painting. I want to paint this a little bit thinner because I do want, like I said, some of that, it's almost antiquing kind of to come through. Reminds me of a Rembrandt painting of his windmills. There's all these really beautiful turquoise, blues and browns and golds in the paintings of his windmills. So then as clouds get further and further away, they get more layered, and that was kind of what was happening here. And I don't want to make them too pointing, so I want to just suggest it a little bit. I have to suggest a little bit darker passages of the sky. And here I have to have some here, otherwise these clouds won't really stand out. So using this gentle sort of circular, almost a rubbed out sort of feeling over here, just doing it that way. You know, let's come back and adjust things, but what I don't want is for it to be distracting. So I want to make sure that it's not going to be really jarring, more felt. We just want it to be felt more than anything. And in order to have that tree stand out against the background, I need the background to be a little bit lighter behind the tree. And that's okay because we've got these clouds back there. So I'm going to go over the tree a little bit. Okay, now coming back into some of these clouds. I want those more the yellow, ochre, and white. Nice thing about letting this first layer dry while you're painting is that from layer to layer, if I make a mistake, I can wipe out my fresh paint and the original painting is still there, and that's kind of nice. Again, I'm always thinking about the composition and where I want things to travel. Looking at the way that these clouds lay on here this way. And I liked that for the way it really happened, but I also like it compositionally too. Again, this is just yellow, ochre, and white. Going back over any brush strokes that I think are distracting, or if it doesn't help to tell the story, don't put it in. And that's what I'm doing with some of these. This is just the first pass on the clouds too. I'll come back over and just scumble a few highlights where I think that they're needed, which will be mostly in this area. While I'm still using this big brush, I just want to get the bigger things done, and then I'll switch to a little bit smaller one. These get heavy. Yellow, ochre, white. Let's do a touch of the cad yellow. Just kind of gently scumbling on a few passes of the cloud information. I'll come back to this later and play with it a little more, but let's see what happens with that. I want to reserve the brightest lights for what's happening on the horse, so it's tempting to push these to a little bit brighter, but you have to be careful and reserve those strongest points for those areas of the greatest impact. I'm also just patterning these clouds after what I had plein air painted. get a little bit more paint on here, and I can just scoop it backwards like that. I might even put a little bit of violet. I see some purples up in there in the clouds. Okay, so that, oops, I'll just grab a little alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue. And I'll just take it right into that whitish mixture that I have. More down around the horizon. In the front of this castle, it's the castle's getting a highlight, so I kind of want the clouds here on this side to be a teeny bit darker, and that'll just make it sort of pop more. You've got to make those decisions. Over here there was purples, but then there's like there are villages and sort of rolling hills back there, so I do want to paint those as I get over there. I think we need more of a presence of violet. Let's grab some of that white with the alizarin. Oh, that's too bright. Tone that down. Now it's too thingy, we look right at it, and so I don't want to do that. I'll just kind of lose it to the background a little bit. I don't want to do too much because I really do want some of that color to show through in the background, the underpainting. And I know that this is going to be one of the brightest lights in the whole painting. So I kind of want this to be a little bit darker around it to really offset that. All right, his red feathers are in there, so we'll kind of let that figure out as we go along. I know that this is red on the back of the horse, and I do like that idea, so I think I'm going to go with a greener right in that area, but I'll do it with yellow ochre and blue, a little white, because those are the distant hills way back here, and that is that color that I used in there, yellow ochre and ultramarine blue. But I'm going to let some of that underpainting show through, so I'm just putting it on thin. Trees way back there, very soft. And I don't want any of these edges back here to have a sharpness to them. But I do want to suggest these hedgerows and some of these things. You don't need, I don't want to put a whole lot of detail in there because it's really not what it's about. It's just to kind of make us feel like there's a lot back there without really painting it. So these rows of trees, as they're coming closer, are a little bit darker. So I'm just graduating them to be a little bit more blue and a little more sienna and some ochre in there, just to get them darker. Oops. Okay, and then I'm going to just take the same colors that I've been using over here and put them over here. Ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, a little sienna, and then some of this white ochre mixture here for a little bit lighter value, darker value. So let's grab that darker. I'm just looking at my thumbnail, or my plein air, getting some of these far away little pieces of information way back there. Let's do a little bit of purple back there too. Way back there. Not very much. Really just want it to feel like the landscape goes way back there. So let's make that a little darker now. A little more ochre. That's about that. You always want to have a window of, this is my lightest light, where is my darkest dark going to be? So in this, the eye is drawn to the area of the greatest contrast in your painting, so that's going to be my center of interest, so that will also have my darkest dark in it. That means all of my other darks are going to be in relation to whatever's going to be the darkest dark on here. So that has to be my scale. And I did want this painting in a lower value scale, so we're going to be singing in the low notes here. And that's okay, but all of our darks are going to be very close. So keeping this really simplified, this is just the same dark I'm putting on this whole side of this hill. What a majestic place to build this monastery, up on top of this rise. Wow. Just going to unify those shadows in there. I'll come in and play with some more of those beautiful colors that we had in there when it comes to that. Okay, I'm going to put this down. And working my way around this way, just continuing on with the same process here. And this is pretty dark over here, so I don't want this going really much darker than that. So I'm really just applying the same color over that, or the same value, but a different color. Maybe a little bit more ochre in there. It needs to be a little darker. And there will be times and passages in this painting process where it will just be, I will be quiet, and it might even be a little bit fast forwarded because there's a lot of detail and information in here that I do want to get in there, but it isn't necessary that it's seen in regular time. So, and a lot of it is self-explanatory too. There, I'm going to come over here and put it in this area too. Again, all the time, just working on unifying the painting. I always just jump all over. If I have a certain color on my brush, or I'm working on a specific passage that requires, you know, same color here and there or whatever, then you just want to make sure you can economize your paint and your efforts by just using that color wherever you see it. This is a nice warm shadow color over here. Well, it's cool, but I'm adding more ochre and I'm going to let more of that sienna show through down there. Okay, that's fine for that. I'll put some highlights and things shining through there as we get that. Well, I've got this color on my brush. This is what I do. While the paint in the sky is wet, I'm putting those leaves from that tree back in. Because I did like that effect of working that wet into wet up here to get the really soft, muted appearance of small tree branches. And think about them in the clumps that they would reside in. That's fine for now. I can come back later and add the sticks and things. Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears and go back to some of these middle tone values for the grass. So more ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, and let's grab some more cad yellow medium. Just paint those colors together. I want a nice warm, rich green. And a little thinner, so I will be using more linseed oil in this painting than I normally do because, like I said, I want it thinner. So looking at this, I'm looking at where I have these bits of green that are the middle tone range, and you'll see I'm going to be hopping around because I want to get it where I see it. And I was referring back to my plein air. So if you have plein air studies that you did this summer, you could try utilizing one of those in your year-end painting. The temptation is to get in there and put all kinds of detail, but I have to keep in mind that this is where I really want the focus to stay. Really want all that information on the guy and the horse. Not that this isn't important back here, but everything has to have its appropriate balance and degree of importance. And that is kind of, I like that this is a little bit darker green back here, because this hill that it's on tucks under this hill in front, goes down behind. So we're going to play with that a little bit more. sketching from my sketch. I have some different land geography in here. And I'm altering a little bit of the land geography as I'm painting because, or topography, I'm sorry, by just lightening my pressure. If I push harder on my brush, more of the green comes out. And if I push less, then it's lighter, and we have a lighter value. All right, so let's mix up a lighter value while we're talking about it. A little more yellow ochre, cad yellow. And I see this kind of skirting its way up this hill. And at this top, the one called From Tuscany to Tipperary, I demonstrate this plein air painting in it while we were in Ireland at the Rock of Cashel. And so you could see if you own the video series that we did with Renaissance Creative Arts. It's an 8-part video series. 4 of them are from Tuscany and 4 are from Ireland. Well, plein air, they're all plein air. And in there I talk a lot about painting greens and painting water and things like that. Just gonna make this, I'm adding a little bit of, whoops, we're really losing that linseed oil. A little bit of the white to here because I want this to have sort of an atmospheric effect. Around here. Maybe I can add that a little in here too. Look at that. Let's kind of dot some of this green in here. It's just the grass, so I'll worry about the trees later. I'll put some highlights on those trees just to give them some form. Let's do that right now. I'll take some yellow ochre, a little white. Now, I could take the time and make it look just like my plein air, or I could get the actual photo out on my computer and study all these little trees and the branches and try to make it exact. For now, I'm gonna mostly replicate what I see in the plein air study and then think about coming back through here with more information if I want. That's fine for now. So we're building up the values going up this hillside over here. And I'm gonna really hit the top here with an impact. Yellow ochre, that is the cad yellow. There. Doesn't need much. That's actually a stone wall up there, so I don't want to really lose that. I want to paint that in as soon as I can, but my sketch. I really want to make sure I get the lay of this land here appropriate too. I really want it to match that Rock of Cashel look. not have a strong dark line there. Okay, and I can still see some of the sienna peeking through there. I like that. So we're just gonna, I don't want to overwork it, so I'm gonna step away from that area for now and just get some of this down in here. So I took a little bit of this white, it's almost like a, kind of like a dirty chartreuse. And I'm just gonna put this back here behind the horse's head. I want it a little bit light because the horse's head is silhouetted. And kind of refine the drawing of all that when I get to that area. Maybe I'll just pop in a few patches of more intense light down here, just to help narrate some things in here. I kind of like that looser, sort of scumbled treatment there. So the trees and rocks and things, just a nice dark like this. And just going off of my plein air sketch, a little bit lighter. Just as I see these, they were really these really cool layers in this whole hillside here. The formations of land just sort of broke and rose and crumbled away. And now I want a little bit more atmosphere as we come around this side. That might be too much. Always adjusting any brush strokes that I think look maybe a little messy or whatever. I like some that look naturally messy, but there's some that look sloppy, and so I don't want those. I want everyone to look deliberate and purposeful. So I'm adding a little bit more sienna to some of this down here as the land comes around. Oops, it's too dark. Okay, I'm gonna just pop back some of these highlights as I kind of lost them a little bit. It's too distracting. I want the information here around his head to be a little bit quieter because if it's too busy right next to the horse's face, it'll be distracting to what's going on there. Okay, I guess while I'm over in this corner, I might as well work on the rock itself, the castle. So I'm just mixing up a dark gray, sienna, and blue and white. I think there's some of that green under there, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just very lightly going over what I already have, just enough to give it some structure. Okay, so that's kind of like just a nice middle tone wash over the whole building. So I'm taking a little bit of that white that I had some yellow in and making this as my bounced light up in the shadows. Again, trying really hard to keep it very soft and not overworked. I do like that sienna peeking through. Okay, I'm going to grab some of this white of the sky and just clean up around the buildings with the cloud color. Okay, now I'm going to just take a lot of that white mixture here, some of that yellow, and paint the front of the building. lifting up. And then there's another couple of little, just like that. I'm just going to tone that down a little bit, or shade it down. And then this one back here. And the front of the tower. It's too yellow. And this wall. Needs to be much darker than this side over here. Okay, and then do a middle tone angled here. That's too chalky gray. All right, so I am going to speed this up a little bit here and do some voiceover segments in the remainder of this video. So what I am doing here is I'm just going to work on a little bit more of the greens and the trees and so forth around the horse. And just trying to make in the beginning I had that value pattern around the horse because our eye is drawn to the area of the greatest contrast. I did want a lighter value around behind him. So the horse being a darker, almost silhouetted, that was important to me that I kept that value on the left side of the horse lighter. And then behind the horse, that's way far back in the background. So I really did want that just to recede and to have it all just be a unified, consistent value back there where the meadows and the trees just sort of fade off into the distance. Okay, And again, I'm just using the same greens that I had on my palette, just keeping them very close. And I had to go back through there every now and then and soften some of the edges, because if there was a sharp edge, even in my brushwork, it killed that feeling of being way far away. So I was often going back and just double checking my brushwork to make sure that they were soft and that the values receded. So remember, everything in the distance is very cool. And if you have your plein air study, if you're using that as a reference for something, then you may have those notes, color notes, in your field study. So just always be double checking back at what you had done in the field, just to confirm. And over here, I needed that value. I noticed it was kind of muted and just sort of a darker middle tone. I wanted a few more accent places, really to frame and anchor in that passage on the far left over there. Just some nicer shadows under the trees as it went around. As I'm working on this little stone wall, I really want to capture the feeling of light moving in this passage. And I may lighten that darkness a little bit more because it shouldn't be quite that dark, but I do like the value as it pushes back and really directs the viewer up to the horse. And so I capture that movement of light because the light is more or less hitting our guy from the back. And so logically it would hit the stone wall in about that same area, which does a nice job in really focusing the attention on the black legs of the horse. So I kind of pushed that, and if I had made that stone wall really dark all the way across, it would have broken up the canvas in half. But because I kept the value in the middle of the painting the same value as the meadow beyond, it only broke it up by color change, but not value change. And so that kept that unity there and really kept the focus on the horse. I noticed that the clouds were a little bit too static. They had too strong of a diagonal slicing the sky. And that passage there, the clouds were too marshmallow even. So I wanted to make the one in the middle a little bigger and a little brighter. And also by putting a nice big cumulonimbus cloud in the sky with a piece of architecture in the background, it really makes it feel, you get that sense of scale, of the bigness of the sky and the vastness of the landscape, in comparison to even a castle, which is huge, but by comparison, it's small compared to the sky. So I really want to try to play with that feeling. And then around our man, because he's silhouetted against the sky, I wanted a little bit lighter clouds and a little more of that glowing, luminescent quality there behind him. As I'm painting the road, my thoughts are going to our still life segment when we were studying still lifes, and I'm thinking about the tabletop surface and how when you have the table with the center of interest, the object right in the center, what do you do with the table surface? You create sort of a spotlight area on the tabletop. So that's what I'm doing with this dusty road. I didn't really have a great image for the road in my reference, so I kind of have to make it up. And sometimes you have to do that, and if you're not sure what to do, just keep it very vague and or set up a still life that might sort of echo what you're doing. So in this case, I wanted far off to the left a darker brown value, and then as it moved towards under the horse, a lighter tone where the sun would be hitting it, and then the darker strong shadow. And then of course it's a dusty dirt road, so then you have this dust billowing around his hooves, and the dust has lighter particles, so the light is going to be filtering through the dust. So these are logic things that I'm thinking about while I'm painting, and I really want to encourage you to really break down something. If you don't have all the answers in your reference, set something up. Try to really just put yourself in that scene. What would it look like if you were actually there? And sometimes close your eyes or write down ideas and how you might feel in a certain situation. And those feelings will come through in your paint. Maybe not at first, but eventually they will. As you get feeling in your heart coming out your brush becomes an extension of your thoughts and your mind, your heart. And also how you handle the brush and the brushwork really conveys a lot of the emotion that we're looking for here. As I begin work on the horse, I really want to start with the strongest impact, the lightest light and the darkest dark. And so I'll work my way around and just put in those key notes of the highest high. And so you can see here on my little image that I have that there's strong contrast in this picture, and I really want to try to get that and the rich color. And so that is what I work on in this passage in here, just really getting those isolated where the movement of these lights, like music on this whole horse's body, are going to be playing, and then where these darks are going to connect and how they're going to just work throughout the anatomy. The hardest part at this point is to withhold from putting in too much detail. Just because I see it doesn't mean I should paint it right away. Some of this detail, especially in his face and in the horse's trappings and all of this equipment, is just so beautiful, and I can't wait to get at it. But at this point, I am just going to focus on laying in the pieces of color values as I see them. And then I may actually decide not to put in as much detail as I see. So in the week in between these lessons, I like this time because then I can look at the painting and see where it needs more detail and where I should let some of the detail just fade and not put it in. So you have to make those executive decisions as you're going. Now again, calling to attention the concept of beginning with your extremes, the light and the dark. I also wanted to begin with my most extreme color, which in this case is red. So I wanted to temper that. So if I have one area where the red is going to be most bright and intense, that becomes my scale. So I think the feathers on the head of the horse are much brighter than anywhere else. So I started with just different places of red on the horse and his clothes and things, and with a more neutral tone, and then putting the red of the feathers in, that became my gauge. If those are the brightest bright, then everything else has to go from that as my foundation for brightness. So everything else becomes more muted. There are some patches of yellow on his clothes and on the horse's things that are also bright, but I have to find the brightest one and use that as my marker of most extreme, and then everything else tempers down from there. As I was working on these legs and the darkness of them, and there are parts in here where it is the darkest dark, my thought process was to really make this horse appear to be connected to the ground and give him a sense of massive weight. And so the challenge is that you see all this dust around his hooves, and some of the hooves you don't even see because they're just obscured by the billowing dust, or not even in the pictures. So I had to create that illusion of weight while yet being connected to the earth. And so I kept the value really close from his legs into the shadow under the horse. And I just kind of worked that out in some of those ambiguous hoof anatomy things. You can't paint what you can't see. So if it's not there, then you only can paint what you can see. And unless you're able to set something up or you have reference or however else you can work that. And here there's a little bit of bounce light coming up from the road on the belly of the horse. So I really wanted to make sure that that was picking up some of that light in the air. And you can see it a little bit on the horse's neck too. What helps me to determine when I'm about done with the second phase is when I step back from the painting and if it's covered with a color all over and it still is conveying my concept, my message that I wanted to really talk about in this particular painting. So in this case, I felt, okay, the color is there, my value pattern is still the same, I have the feeling of movement of light and this glow. Yep, I'm ready to stop for the day. All right, well, that wraps this up. And next week we are going to work on finishing the painting.